Everybody wants the new interface. Very few people want the new responsibility. Because the second a company adds AI to an internal workflow, changes the paved road in cloud, or pushes a new gateway layer into production, somebody has to own the policy, the logs, the rollback, and the fallout. That somebody is usually us. Hey, I'm Brian Teller. I work in DevOps and SRE, and I run Teller's Tech. This is Ship It Weekly, where I filter the noise and focus on what actually changes how we run infrastructure and own reliability. Show notes and links are on shipitweekly.fm. If the show's been useful, follow it wherever you listen. Ratings help way more than they should. And if you want more signal between episodes, check out oncallbrief.com. We've got 5 main stories today, then the lightning round, and we'll wrap with the human closer. We're starting with McKinsey because an internal AI tool vulnerability is a nice reminder that internal does not mean low risk. Then Kafka, because the diskless-topics work is one of the more interesting architecture signals I've seen in a while. After that, Google officially closes the Wiz deal, which tells you a lot about where the cloud fight is headed. Then AWS is sunsetting Copilot CLI, which is one of those stories that sounds small right up until it lands on your team's migration list. And finally, Kubernetes is standing up an AI Gateway Working Group, which is probably the clearest sign yet that AI traffic is becoming regular platform traffic, just with stranger payloads. Let's start with McKinsey, because I think this is one of those stories where the real lesson is less flashy than the headline. McKinsey said on March 11th that it was alerted by a security researcher to a vulnerability related to its internal AI tool. Lilli confirmed it, fixed it within hours, and found no evidence client data or client confidential information had been accessed by the researcher or any other unauthorized third party. And sure, the official takeaway there is we moved quickly and no client data appears to have been accessed. Fine. That part matters. But the reason I think this is worth covering is that it keeps happening across the industry, where companies treat internal AI tools like they are somehow lighter weight than normal applications. They are not. The second an internal AI tool can touch company knowledge, shape decision flow, or influence what people trust, it stops being a novelty and starts being part of your operating surface. Same auth questions, same blast radius questions, same logging questions, same need for somebody to own the thing when it goes weird. That inference is based on the kind of access and sensitivity McKinsey itself describes around Lilli, and on the fact that the company treated the issue as a serious security matter requiring forensic review. So the practical lesson here is simple. Internal AI app is not a special category. It is still an app. If your org has quietly stood up a chatbot, assistant, code helper, search helper, support helper, whatever, and it can see real context or influence real work, then congratulations. You now have another production service wearing a friendlier mask. One thing to check this week. Make a list of every internal AI thing your company now treats as normal. Then ask the boring questions. What can it read? What can it write? What identities does it assume? What gets logged? What would forensics look like after a bad day? If nobody can answer that clearly, there's your work. Now to the most infrastructure-shaped story in the episode. Kafka's KIP-1150 proposes diskless-topics, where topic data is stored durably in object storage instead of brokered disks. Replication is delegated to object storage, and no broker is uniquely the leader of a partition. The proposal also explicitly says early diskless topics would not immediately support compaction or transactional writes, and it describes append latency as buffering plus remote upload time, with P99 upload times in the rough 200 to 400 millisecond range in the design notes. That is not a minor improvement. That is a pretty serious statement about where cloud economics keep pushing distributed systems. because a lot of the old assumptions around platforms like Kafka came from a world where durable local storage and broker-centric replication made obvious sense. In cloud, especially once across AZ traffic and storage costs show up in the bill at scale, those assumptions get expensive. This proposal is basically saying maybe the right answer is not to keep optimizing the old center of gravity forever. Maybe the center of gravity moved. And that's what makes this story interesting to me. Not that every team is about to run diskless Kafka tomorrow. Most won't. The interesting part is the architecture honesty. It is admitting that cloud-native economics can eventually force cloud-native redesign, not just better tuning knobs. So if you run distributed systems, this is the kind of story worth paying attention to. Not because you need the feature today, but because it is a sign that the old durable core assumptions are starting to crack in places where cost and scale finally get loud enough. One thing worth asking this week, where are you still paying an old architecture tax because the system was designed around hardware or topology assumptions that no longer match the environment you actually buy? Next up, Google and Wiz. Google announced on March 11th that it completed its acquisition of Wiz, that Wiz will join Google Cloud, and that Wiz will keep its brand and continue securing customers across all cloud environments. TechCrunch reported the deal at $32 billion and called it Google's biggest acquisition ever. That matters because this is not just a big company buying a hot security startup. It is Google spending an absurd amount of money on the idea that cloud security posture, multi-cloud visibility, and AI-era security operations are now part of the core platform fight. And honestly, that tracks with how teams actually operate now. The cloud conversation is not just compute anymore. It is identity posture, exposure management, policy, visibility across ugly, mixed environments. And whether your security layer still works once half the company is touching 3 clouds and 6 SaaS platforms and some new AI service somebody turned on last week. Google's own announcement frames the acquisition as a bet on cloud security and helping organizations build across any cloud or AI platform. That is the real takeaway for me. Security is not bolted onto platform anymore. It is part of the platform buying decision itself. So if your company still talks about cloud strategy over here and security strategy over there, like they are 2 separate decks, that feels increasingly fake. Those are the same conversations now, or at least they should be. Now for the AWS story that is probably already annoying somebody. AWS announced that Copilot CLI will reach end of support on June 12, 2026. AWS says the tool will still exist as an open source project on GitHub, but it will no longer receive new features or security updates from AWS. And the migration guidance points people towards ECS Express mode or AWS CDK Layer 3 constructs. This is exactly the kind of platform story that sounds smaller than it is. Because Copilot was not just CLI. For a lot of teams, it was the we can ship containers on AWS without building an entire internal platform first path. It was the paved road. And when the vendor changes the paved road, teams inherit migration work whether they asked for it or not. That's the part cloud people know in their bones. The easy path is temporary. The recommended abstraction is rented. And even when the replacement makes sense, you still pay retraining tax, docs tax, migration tax, and that wonderful tax where somebody asks you why you spent time changing this when it was technically still working yesterday. I think the bigger signal here is that AWS is still refining how opinionated it wants to be around container delivery. Fair enough. But if you build on vendor convenience, you need an exit story before the deprecation notice shows up, not after. So one practical check here. If your team depends on a managed or vendor-blessed workflow for something important, do you already know the off-ramp? Last main story, and this one is a really clean signal. Kubernetes announced the AI Gateway Working Group on March 9th. The group says it is focused on standards and best practices for networking infrastructure that supports AI workloads in Kubernetes, including token-based rate limiting, fine-grained access controls for inference APIs, payload inspection for routing and guardrails, and active proposals around payload processing to defend against malicious prompts and prompt injection. It is also looking at egress patterns for securely routing traffic to external AI services. That is a loud clue about where the real work is headed. Because once the Kubernetes ecosystem starts formalizing the gateway and policy layer around AI traffic, the interesting part is no longer just which model are we calling or what prompt trick did somebody discover this week. The interesting part becomes operational. Who can hit what? How traffic gets shaped, what gets inspected, what gets cached, what gets blocked, what happens when external model providers are in the path, what gets logged when a request goes sideways. This is platform work, which is why I like this story so much. It cuts past a lot of hype and lands in a place that feels real. If your org is already exposing inference endpoints or routing to outside model providers, treat that traffic like any other sensitive path. Rate limit it, wrap auth around it, think about payload handling, think about egress control, and think about observability. It's the same game, just weirder packets. A few quick ones before we wrap. Amazon Bedrock added 2 new CloudWatch metrics: time to first token and estimated TPM quota usage. That matters because it gives teams first token latency and quota consumption visibility without client-side instrumentation. And both metrics are updated every minute for successfully completed requests. Cloudflare now returns structured JSON for its 1xxx errors when clients send except application/JSON or application/problem plus JSON. And those responses follow RFC 9457. Tiny story, but a good one for automation, agents, and anything that should not have to scrape messy error blobs to figure out what happened. AWS S3 server access logs now include source region information automatically at the end of each log entry, which makes it easier to spot cross-region access patterns that can quietly turn into cost or latency problems. AWS Config added 30 more supported resource types in early March, including Bedrock Agent Core resources like AWS Bedrock Agent Core Gateway and AWS Bedrock Agent Core Memory, which is just another reminder that compliance and inventory scope keep expanding while nobody is looking. And a reminder that Bedrock Agent Core Runtime now supports stateful MCP server features like elicitation, sampling, and progress notifications, with each user session running in a dedicated micro VM and keeping context across interactions. That is the kind of thing that makes agent systems feel a lot less like demos and a lot more like infrastructure. I think the cleanest takeaway this week is that the new interface does not remove the old responsibilities. McKinsey's Lilli story says your internal AI app is still an app. Kafka's diskless push says cloud economics eventually force architectural honesty. Google closing Wiz says security and platform strategy are now tangled together at the executive level. Copilot getting sunset says convenience is borrowed. And the Kubernetes AI gateway effort says the next layer of work is going to be policy, routing, inspection, and traffic control around these systems, not just model selection. So the job is still the job. Make the control plane observable. Make permissions explicit. Keep the rollback clean. Don't let internal turn into unreviewed. And don't mistake a new interface for a new set of operational laws. Most of the laws are the same. They just keep showing up in new clothes. All right, that's it for this week of Ship It Weekly. Quick recap: McKinsey's Lilli vulnerability and why internal AI tools are still real attack surfaces. Kafka's diskless-topics push and what it says about cloud shaping architecture. Google officially closing the Wiz acquisition. AWS sunsetting Copilot CLI. And Kubernetes standing up an AI gateway working group because AI traffic is becoming platform traffic whether we like it or not. Links and show notes are on shipitweekly.fm. You can also find the video versions on YouTube. And if you want the DevOps news before the show, you can check out oncallbrief.com. If this episode was useful, follow or subscribe wherever you listen. And send it to the person on your team who keeps hearing just add AI while quietly inheriting all the policy. observability, and guardrail work that comes with it. I'm Brian, and I'll see you next week.